Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our first guest noticed a pattern in her relationships that she wanted to change. So she decided to spend some time being celibate. Her latest book chronicles that period and what she learned from it. We welcome back the author of The Dry Season, a memoir of pleasure in a year without sex, Melissa Febos. Great to see you again. Okay, what started this? What was going on that you were having an issue with and realized, I need to just take a break?
Thanks. It's great to be back. Ever since I was 15, I had been in nonstop committed, basically monogamous relationships.
Right.
So for about 20 years. And I think as a young girl,
without any breaks in between,
with
one relationship to the next.
Not really, just kind of a daisy chain in a way. And then in my early 30s, I had this sort of catastrophic breakup and I really lost myself in a relationship for a couple of years. And I looked around me, I was in my early 30s, a lot of my friends are married or in long-term partnerships. And I thought, I've been in therapy a long time and I've been in a lot of relationships. I think I should be better at this. Like, why am I hitting this kind of bottom?
Didn't a therapist say to you, or was it your mom? Because your mom's a therapist too, right?
I mean, who didn't say it to me?
Said, take a break, take a break.
Everybody was like, maybe you should try being alone a little bit. My therapist at the time actually said this really brilliant thing to me once where she said, Melissa, you can't get enough of a thing you don't need. Like, stop shuttling through looking for the right person as if it's a pair of shoes. And if you find the right one, you're going to be fulfilled and you're going to love yourself and your life is going to be complete. And, after this year I spent celibate, I realized that she had been right, that I really needed to become the right person rather than endlessly sort of shopping for the right person.
And did you start out with I'll give it 3 months?
I did. I started with 3 months, which I know a lot of people laughed at me.
Well, there are those of us who would say a year.
It's true.
That's silly.
It's really true. It's really true.
How about, a couple of decades?
I know. It's really true. And I had that fact in my mind as I was writing the book and as I was living it. But the truth was that during that time and since I published the book, I talked to a lot of people who were celibate not by choice.
Right.
And it turns out we almost immediately found that we had more in common than we did different. And that we both had a problem of extremes. We all had a problem in our relationship to aloneness, and we're sort of not looking for fulfillment in our relationship to ourselves, but looking for it in our relationships with other people. And that kind of need and dependency was sort of cursing our relationships. We're kind of stuck in a pattern.
Yeah. You talk too about your addiction in your memoir, and you've been sober for quite some time, and so this was kind of another way to kind of be free of something. So, but how difficult was it for you? Because you also started in the book being attracted to a woman. You're on the plane, and you're attracted to this woman on the plane. Yeah,
which happened at the 6-month mark. But yeah, at the time when I spent the time celibate, I was over 10 years clean and sober from drugs and alcohol. It's now been 20 years. But
congratulations.
Thank you
That's
so
huge.
much. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and I wasn't sure. I sort of went into the experience with the question, does this fit within the rubric of addiction? Like, am I a love and sex addict, primarily a love addict? And it didn't quite seem to fit. I had had specific relationships that were addictive, but my relationship to relationships was problematic in much more of sort of a sweeping way. And I ended up during that time really tracing it back to my childhood and the sort of stories that I absorbed about what romance was, and particularly for women, that being desired, getting romantic attention, being loved, and being seen as lovable was really sort of where my self-esteem should come from and where fulfillment was going to come from. And I think I sort of guttered out in my 30s because it just wasn't working. And I thought, I need a new conception of love and romance and fulfillment because I am trying really hard and it's just not happening for me.
So wait, was it more about the relationship, like being celibate from relationships, or being celibate from sex?
It really was. I started with sex because that seemed really straightforward. I thought, sex
you
is
could be in a relationship and not have sex.
Totally, but I thought sex is the common denominator in most of these things. Let me just try it. It felt sort of tidy, right? But almost immediately in my celibacy, I sort of flirted with someone and I got that little exciting, bit of brain chemicals, and I thought, no, that's the thing I'm chasing. I'm chasing that excitement, kind of the high of it, the way it makes me feel really good about myself for a short period of time. And it really ended up being much more about the emotional, psychological preoccupation participation with other people than it had to do with any specific act. And, you know, I opened the book with this very tempting moment that happened about halfway through the year. But the truth was, within weeks, I was actually having the time of my life. When I say it was the happiest year of my life up until that point, it's not an exaggeration.
Yeah. Oh.
As soon as I stopped being obsessed about sort of romance and my love story, I started having the best time.
You say you saw things clearer.
I really did. I really did. I had more time for everything else that I cared about in life. My friendships flourished, my family relationships. I got sort of back in touch with my body in a new way. And I really got into this habit of focusing on myself in the same way that I had focused on other people. And ironically, that didn't make me more self-centered. It made me more available to other people because I was sort of living in my truth in a way that I hadn't realized I hadn't been for a very long time.
Is there any difference, you're a lesbian, is there any difference than it in a heterosexual relationship? Do you think it would have been any different? Are women different about this kind of thing versus men?
Yeah, I actually think that, you know, for me, I had thought I might be sort of exempt from this kind of other focus in relationships because I was mostly dating women, but I still grew up in a culture that sort of fetishizes heterosexual paradigms, let's say. And so I grew up with this messaging that in order to be a good partner, you have to sort of sacrifice yourself and do things for the other and keep your partner happy. And it's so important to hold on to your partner because for a really long time, women's safety and survival did depend upon being lovable and appealing and useful to men because we didn't have any rights, you know? And so I do think, you know, in this political climate, I have heard about a lot of women sort of experimenting with celibacy and saying, you know what, I'm sick of this. I'm exhausted. I've been sort of living in the service of others in a way that compromises my truth for long enough, and I'm unhappy. And I don't actually need a partner to be happy. And so it makes a lot of sense to me because that was very much my experience. And I think it sort of transcends sexual orientation because we all grow up in the culture with the same stories and the same messages. And to a large extent, it is a gendered kind of messaging.
Right. At what point do you decide, okay, this is it, it's been a year?
Yeah. Well, you know, it was about 9 months in that I was so happy that I honestly was like, I don't know if I will ever want to be in another relationship. Like I would think about living with another person and like, yuck. I am never letting anyone else into my house or my bed, trying to talk to me first thing in the morning, wanting me to do things for them.
There are a lot of married people that feels that.
I know.
Right
I mean, let me tell you, it's been an adjustment. I'm married now, and it's been. I had to really find the right person who was going to let me experience my autonomy inside of our relationship. But so at 9 months, I was like, I'm not even counting anymore. I don't need a deadline. I'm going to be alone forever. But then, you know, a little while after the year mark passed, I did end up meeting someone, and I thought, okay, it's time for the rubber to meet the road. Let's see if I can.
You knew she was. Tell me about her.
Sure, she's a poet.
You dedicate the book to her.
I dedicate the book to her. She was my first reader for the book. And, you know, I met her because I read her first book of poetry, Bestiary. I just liked the cover and the title, and I read it. And I just thought this person and I have something very deep and intrinsic in common. And we actually became sort of pen pals, and we corresponded for a little while. It wasn't romantic or flirty at all.
Danika's her name,
Danica Kelly. And then we met after about 2 months of sort of writing emails back and forth. And you know how, I assume you know how it is. There was sort of instant chemistry. And I thought, whoa, slow down. Don't do what you've always done. Don't cannonball into a new relationship, right? And I shared with her my experience really early on, and I said, I want a different kind of relationship. I don't want us to need each other. I want us to choose each other every single day that we're together. And we both made a real commitment to that, and we've been together going on 9 years now.
That's so great. You're going to be at Livewire tonight,
I am,
right?
I'm really looking forward to it. I love Livewire.
Awesome. We want to tell everyone the book again is titled The Dry Season, a Memoir of Pleasure in a Year Without Sex. Melissa Febos, great to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, we'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.